So the talk is about consciousness in general, but human consciousness in particular. And the picture is to remind us that human consciousness can produce some very odd situations. And I'll have more to say about that later. The background to the talk is this remark by Owen Schrödinger. And I think we can be quite sure that Schrödinger would approve of biosemiotics for at least two reasons. First, it's a discipline that builds bridges. Essentially, it is to build bridges to other disciplines. And also it has as its objective the naturalization of awareness, experience, consciousness.
Constantine, there seems to be a strong echo.
A problem? So while they're fixing the problem, just to say that
there's an echo. So my guess is that the audio settings somehow are. Mine's completely.
No.
Blame him. Yeah. So. We evade these implied criticisms. And just as a reminder that bridges can take you into new places, new cultures, new countries. You've cured the echo and killed this. The talk has four sections, catalyzing. Well, I noted, and the first one is catalyzing a transition. This is Ian McGilchrist. I strongly recommend him to biosemioticians. I've talked to him and explained as far as I can what biosemiotics is. He's very approving, but he's a very nice guy and he approves of everything. But he's an important figure and will become more so, I think. Why does he think there's an urgent need to transform how we think of the world and how we think of ourselves? Well, it's because we know this. There's a malaise, and we inherit it from the 19th century, and it's this reductive, atomistic view of the world, which is totally wrong and damaging. And he says not only as a mistake, but physically damaging and psychologically and morally and spiritually to ourselves. Well, we know all too well about this damage. But this damage is a bit like the damage being done by Gaza and Ukraine. We know it's going on. We're very powerless to stop it. And so we don't think about it, but because you know it, it's damaging. We know that people who can buy Venice for a couple of days are contributing fairly directly to the fact that she can't find water for her family. But what can we do? Now, this is Stuart Kaufman, who is known very well in these circles. This was said in 2012 to another gathering, I think. He wants to take you from one world to another. So he wants a transformation too. And his world is a world of becoming and co-creation. And more recently, in 2023, he wrote with Andrea Rowley a paper in which he said this: we're facing, in a good way, a major transition in science beyond the Pythagorean dream of all is number. There can be no theory of everything. The world is unprestatable. You can't tell what's coming. And he specifically points to the theory of evolution, and he says this is why we cannot predict what's coming, because evolution throws up ever new affordances. They are new, and then they are seized actively and made into new things again. Ever new, adaptive function, unprestatable. We can't see it coming. This is Tim Ingold, who's also known in biosemiotic circles, and I've had quite a few conversations with him, and he's critically but deeply engaged with biosemiotics. But here he's writing about what he calls two kinds of science. One's the one we've inherited from the 19th century, a world of things in which the billiard balls bang into each other. The other kind of science, which is rather like a shadow which precedes, turns things into processes. Things emerge as irregularities in a flux of things, in a flux of energy. And following Deleuze and Guattari, he calls the first sort of science the science of the major, and the science of the minor is the shadow. And the theory of evolution, in his view, is fundamentally incomplete because it is a science still of the first sort, the major sort. And underneath his ideas, as underneath Deleuze and Merleau-Ponty, is Whitehead. And for Whitehead, you can either look at animals from the outside, or you can try and sort of not become, but understand them as phenomenal beings. And to do that is to approach evolution in the way of the minor science. But as Tim says, this is an evolution of mind as it is of life. Well, Dennis Noble is saying something of the same sort. Conscious agency drives evolution. This is what Stuart Kaufman was saying when he talks about the seizing of new affordances. And he's saying this in a paper, in a very appreciative commentary on a paper by Ginsberg and Jablonka in the Biosemiotics. So the second bit of the talk is what we make of ourselves. This is to complete Schrödinger's remark that they are continuous. The point about synthesizing with the rest of knowledge is to answer the question, who are we? Well, since the 19th century, that's who we think we are. That's where we came from. Man is but a worm. And Ernst Haeckel, at the end of the 19th century, in his answering the question of the riddle of the universe, well, it's solved. It's a mechanism. But paradoxically, Haeckel was a firm panpsychist. He thought matter itself felt and had intentions. It's worth remembering that. But in his appreciation of Jablonka and Ginsberg, Dennis Noble says this. He argues it's the harnessing of stochasticity. Well, this is what Kaufman's talking about when he's talking about the seizing of affordances. The affordances appear are like 100,000 tumbling dice. We don't know what's going to come up. Stochastic. It's unpredictable. But it can be harnessed by active choice. Now, Ginsberg and Jablonka look at consciousness from through a number of different levels. My criticism of their paper, excellent though it is that they're starting far too late. These aspects of human consciousness particularly come far too late if you want to naturalize experience and consciousness. The most basic aspects that they examine are intentionality, the aboutness of things, and the distinction between self and other. And they make this remark in passing. How is the agency of non-sentient organisms, etc.? That's an empty category. There is no such thing. An organism, by definition, is sentient. And I want to show you one. You may have seen this before. That leukocyte is pursuing the microbe. It knows what it's doing. It's sentient. It's not a projective mistake to say it looks like it's got intentions. certainly has, and it's achieved them. So organisms are sentient by definition. Whoops. And going back to man is but a worms. Well, even worms distinguish self from other. And again, this is going to be a very short video of someone called Sean Carroll, who's a quantum physicist, but a great communicator about scientific ideas. Now, I knew this would happen. There's no sound. Should have tried this before. Fine. Okay. So even worms have a glimmer of self-awareness. And notice that at the beginning he said, surely you don't think I'm just a bunch of atoms obeying the laws of physics. Well, yes, I do. That's him speaking. I can't prove it, but it's a reasonable conjecture. And it should remind us that a lot of ideas that scientists have are not disprovable in Popperian sense. They're abductive. They're a surmise. Okay, so where next? So once there is a self-other distinction, we have the possibility of relation to other. And this quotation is from somebody, I don't know, is Yogi Handlin, some crazy guy from somewhere, in an interview. And it said, our mind is in the world, it's emergent through the relations we have with other beings. Well, two things make the human mind related to those of other beings in a very curious and unique way. And I want to quickly talk about them. The first is metaphoric perception, and the second is emancipated signification. By metaphoric perception, I mean animals approach the world and see what possibilities for action exist. They treat affordances as is in the present, the world as it is. What can I do now? We can do that, but equally we can look at the world and we can treat the world as if it might be other, as if it were something else. We can take a stone and knock bits off and make something like a fingernail out of it. Animals do that to some extent, but human beings do it to such an extent that we're in a qualitatively different domain, I suggest. That is metaphoric perception. And metaphoric perception opens the doorway to technology. And Gilbert Simondon writes very persuasively about the effect of technology, the autonomy of technology, and the co-evolution of what he calls technicity between human beings and technology. And in the course of some of his writings, I've noticed he says technological objects have a superabundance of affordances. Let me give you one of many examples. weighing machines in doctors' surgeries to weigh patients used to have springs and pointers inside the mechanical devices. Then they went to pressure chambers. So you stand on it, the pressure increases, and now you know how heavy it is. But as the transduction of the pressure became more and more accurate, it was noted that there was another signal in there. And that signal was the heartbeat, because as the heart beats, the scale feels it. And the transduction was sensitive enough to pick it up. But it wasn't designed to do that. That's a superabundance of affordance. And I suggest that this is, at the cultural level, what Dennis Noble was talking about at the biological level. Now, the emancipation of the sign, well, this is a semiotics conference. John Deely crisply points out what it is that is so makes human beings capable of such odd things. Only we can detach signs and realize that they exist. Jean Baudrillard, a historian, cultural analyst, wild man, talks about what he calls the emancipation of the sign. He talks about it in Marxist terms. So there was, first of all, there's use value, then exchange value, and now he thinks that sign value dominates the political economy of the world. And in the term emancipation of the sign, he says it removes the archaic obligation to designate something. Well, a sign, by definition, designates something. Well, not quite so. It does, but what it does has become, because of the oddity of human consciousness, has become detached from its archaic context. And signs are now free, mobile. So as birds evolved from their dinosaur ancestors, perhaps they became more seasonal, I'm not sure. But when in the season of reproduction, mating season, the warblers here put out signs to say, I'm in business, I'm healthy, how about it? Other birds externalize signs, and this is a wonderful bowerbird. And I love this picture because it seems to me that the blue bowerbird who's made this is being visited by two prospective mate partners, the green bowerbirds, and they look terribly critical to me. I think they're saying to him, is this the best you can do? And he's saying, well, yeah, that's, I just don't fancy his chances. Poor guy. Well, perhaps, who knows? But of course, the signs of the animal world and the plant world are, as Umberto Eco said, a sign is something you can lie with. And they do. Plants lie that they're animals, and animals lie that they're plants. But when humans, they're not lying. This isn't a mushroom, that isn't a gherkin, but they've picked up a sign because it's so mobile and can use the gills of mushrooms to support the roof. They are using the sign in a very rich way. This is called the gherkin, but actually the model is a sea cucumber. But then, of course, signs being as mobile as they are, human beings make signs about science. And this is Frank Gehry. I believe that building has something to do with optics. I don't know. But that building is the headquarters of the company that makes those baskets. But then, of course, you go even further with artistic representations that make signs about science and make a sort of joke of it. And you can have some fun with signs. They're so mobile. So Lenin points to the great proletarian future. Does he? No, he doesn't. He points to the supermarket. We can also be. I'm not sure about the next picture, but we can also be more pointed with our signs. And I've used this in talks since 2004 when it was made. And there, nobody needed any explanation as to what that was. And now, of course, with younger people, there's this, what's that in the middle? They don't know that it comes from that. And this reminds me of the remark made about Cassira's point about the historicity of the symbols which we use to understand the world. And this emancipated signification has detached us from the world which Yogi points out we have absorbed our minds through relation, but that relation is strongly challenged. And finally, we should always ask, I should always ask, what's the use of this? Detached minds are very powerful. They can make rhinoceroses fly through the air. Why they pulled the poor beast's legs up like that rather than using a net, I have no idea, but it looks terrible to me, but there you are. We can make chemicals that will pacify the poor beast, and chains and helicopters, and we know all this. And it's with the best intentions, of course. But it wouldn't be necessary if the climate wasn't changing so fiercely. So detached minds are effective but dangerous. And I think this is what Ian is saying, though he doesn't talk about, he does talk about the detachment of mind, but in a different way. And so this is the other thinker, writer, activist I'd like to commend to the world of biosemiotics, Jeremy Lent. I think we know this, but he writes extensively on what we might do about it. And we need to remember that that's where we and our minds come from, an endless meshwork of life going back over billions of years. And Paul Mosley is another environmental writer. I couldn't get a picture of him, but he talks about animism. And we've heard from Nora the need for a language which is intrinsically process-like and inclusive. Well, in cultures which preserve a holistic view of the world, I think that language might be the first language learned, the language you learn from your mother, parents. And he particularly talks about Tim Ingold's view. Tim is an anthropologist and has great respect for animistic cultures within which he's worked a lot. A dynamic, transformative relation to beings of all kinds that continually and reciprocally bring one another into existence. Well, you recovering something, we can't go back. There's no way back. We get buses, we fly planes. We can't go back to having the lifestyles of people who grow up in cultures which are animistic, and you get it with your mother's milk. But we can know that that exists and think perhaps how it might be internalized in our own lives, or perhaps in the lives of people with whom we have conversations, or perhaps people who we teach. And finally, who are we? Well, throughout his life, Schrödinger was a Vedantist, and Vedanta is the fundamental metaphysics of everything he does, his physics, his philosophical writings, his worldview, his view of himself, and it's on his gravestone. Consciousness is singular. There's only one consciousness in the world, and you, a bit like a sort of cookie cutter, you take a bit and that's a rhinoceros, you take a bit, that's me, you take a bit and that's a worm. But there's only one. Now, the problem with hearing something like that and being attracted to it is that, as Gustav Jung pointed out, when Westerners approach Eastern metaphysics, they distort it, whether they want to or not, by projective distortion. That is to say, we have destroyed our mystical traditions pretty much in the last 400 years in the westernized world. And it's left an aching void. And Westerners, the Beatles go to Rishikesh to find whatever they found there to smoke. Though, of course, George Harrison got something. And when he died, his ashes went into the Ganges. It wasn't all nonsense at all. But there is a problem. How are we to make use of... Is it helpful to try and look at this, the plants, the animals, that animal, the animal flying the helicopter, the exo and endoparasites in the flying rhinoceros? They're all part of one consciousness. I don't know what to do with it. I mean, this is just finishing with my problem. Perhaps you can help me. I'm attracted to it, but I don't know how to fit it in. But then, of course, I've grown up in a particular culture with a particular implicit metaphysics that I can't get rid of. That's the shape I am now. But there's something there that's useful. And I hope it may be useful to help us communicate across well outside our particular silo and produce the language that Nora Bateson might be searching for, or the means to communicate that Barbara was talking about. So thanks for listening. And I should say, obviously, you can contact me with that. And it's just that last bit. There's a long, it's not an article, but there's a handout that goes with this talk.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my hearing's not too good. Uh-huh.
If there aren't really objects out there, that we create objects in our minds, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing real out there.
Ontology Without Borders. I can remember that. Thank you.